Winning the Hunger Games earns you a mansion in the victor's village. But here's the real question. Why does the capital care enough to build a luxury neighborhood in each of the districts for only a handful of people? You think back to the early games when they'd send you home on a train with nothing. So why the change? Why give victors a good life if their survival meant nothing from the start? Any victor will tell you that games don't end when you win. Victor's Village is another piece of the capital system. This neighborhood gives a glimpse of capital privilege, just enough to make the games feel a little less like a punishment and more as an opportunity to escape. At face value, it promises lifelong wealth, safety from another reaping, and freedom. But Panem is not a free country, and any such promise is an illusion. There is a lot to uncover here: how it was created, what life inside is really like, and how it appears in the books. That part matters because the movies cut quite a few scenes and even changed the design. We're going to cover all of it, and at the end, just for fun, we'll imagine what each district's victor's village might look like using world building clues. If you're new around here, consider joining us. This is where we talk about all things Hunger Games. After the 10th Hunger Games, Coriolanus Snow became a game maker and learned if the games were going to survive, people had to accept them. For the capital, that meant turning them into an entertaining TV show, but selling it to the districts would be a little harder. Victor's Village was one of Snow's ideas. He described it as a way to tempt a better class of tributes to possibly volunteer. If the arena was filled with people who wanted to be there, opposed to starving kids who die immediately, it made for better television before and during the games. Volunteering never took hold in a place like District 12, where Katniss says the word tribute is basically another word for corpse. That's a big reason why Katniss stands out as a volunteer, especially from the poorest district, because she wasn't going for the usual reason to chase a win, she did so to save someone else. Volunteering to chase fame and fortune is an interesting ideology, and why I wish we saw more of the other districts. We spend a lot of the story on districts 8, 11, and 12, the districts that hate the games the most, the first ones to rebel, and that makes up a lot of our impression of Panem. But in places like 5, 6, 9, or 10, the districts we know practically nothing about, they might have a more complicated relationship with the games. The promise of Victor's Village and the rewards of winning might carry some real weight. This worked best in the wealthiest districts 1, 2, and 4, where tributes are granted a special privilege by the capital to train and then volunteer. These are known as the career tributes. They didn't just come to accept the games, they prepared and even celebrated them. So why even allow volunteers? Is it really worth it for that so-called better class? Wouldn't the games be scarier if the two names pulled had no escape, no chance for someone to come and save them? This is the brilliance behind Victor's Village, and the answer goes back to a scene in the first film where Snow explains the psychology of the games to head game maker Seneca Crane. If the goal was pure terror, the capital could simply round up people and execute them all at once. But that way of thinking only creates fear, and fear alone isn't enough to keep the districts in line. Hope, carefully controlled, is far more powerful. Instead of forcing the districts to only fear the reaping, he gave them something else to hope for: winning. Becoming a victor means getting a spot in the nicest place in town, but it also comes with some district-wide benefits. The capital throws massive celebrations, feasts, and food parcels for everyone in the winning district, a life visibly better than anything around it. The capital doesn't want the districts hoping the games would end, they wanted them hoping for a win. That small, controlled hope kept people focused on survival and ambition instead of rebellion. And it's exactly why Snow says a little hope is good, but too much is dangerous. Whether Victor's Village was entirely Snow's idea is unclear. Snow grew up poor, not much different from someone in the district, so there's no better person to know what someone would sacrifice for a chance to make it. But the real seed may have come from Casca Highbottom, the man who created the games and spent his life regretting it. After Lucy Gray won the 10th games, Highbottom quietly gave her some money before sending her home. He likely did this with all the first few winners, probably money from his own pocket, an attempt to ease the burden he'd put on them. Snow may have seen that moment and weaponized it. Since it was Snow who created Victor's Village, I wonder if Lucy Gray ever crossed his mind in the process. Maybe not in any sentimental way, but I can't help but imagine Snow finding a place he may have shared with Lucy Gray, a place that may have once meant something, and then paving it over with Victor's Village. The first time we hear about Victor's Village in the books is before the 74th Hunger Games end. Katniss and Peeta are hiding in the cave, imagining they might both survive and get to go home to the same place Haymitch has lived for 24 years. By the time Catching Fire begins 6 months later, they're settled in. These houses are massive by district standards. Katniss says hers is 10 times the size of her old house in the Seam. Far more space than she knows what to do with, and Katniss being Katniss still prefers that old house. She lives in the village with her family, Prim and her mother, but if she were to die, say in an unexpected quarter quell, they'd be forced back to their old residence, that old house in the Seam. The third quarter quell was a major mistake for the capital. Its twist, reaping tributes from the existing pool of victors, was widely believed, by Katniss especially, to be a calculated move to eliminate her and possibly other victors who had caused problems over the years. I have no doubt that's exactly what the capital was doing, but in doing so, they shattered the illusion Victor's Village was built on, that winning meant freedom, safety, and an escape from the games forever. Once that promise was broken, the value of becoming a victor collapsed in the eyes of the districts. It became clear no one can escape the capital, not even if you win, and instead of restoring control, the quell only poured fuel on the growing uprisings. One of the biggest differences between the books and the films is the design of Victor's Village. In the movies, the 12 houses are arranged in neat rows. In the books, it's depicted more like a suburb, with homes spaced apart. There's a great depiction of this in the Catching Fire Illustrated Edition, along with some other scenes that were cut from the films. Each house is slightly different, all with their own unique look. You can see the village is isolated from the rest of District 12, but it's placed on a hill, so it remains visible in the distance. Constructed like a castle, something the kids can look up to and aspire to have. This placement also messes with the victors. It forces them to look down on the district, sending a clear message. Don't forget, you're still district, but you're above them. You exist in a middle ground between district and capital. Gale believes taking out tesserae, the act of receiving a year's worth of grain and oil in exchange for more entries in the reaping, is meant to create a class divide among the poorer and better off families. We see this when Gale throws shade at the mayor's daughter Madge, whose name was never entered more times than necessary. Victor's Village serves the same purpose, a part of the games, creating a divide even within its own district to keep the people from the same home at odds, all done to prevent them from one day uniting. One of the biggest changes to this depiction that makes it a lot like the books is that all the houses connect to a road. When President Snow leaves Katniss after their meeting, he doesn't walk off into the woods. He gets into a car parked outside. Each house has full power, appliances, and personal TVs. Maybe a wealthy merchant or the mayor could afford some of that. Peeta lives alone across the street. His family already owned the bakery, so they were among the better off families. Together, his house and Katniss's feel alive. Warm lights, chimney smoke, and decorations up for the Harvest Festival. Out of the 12 houses, 2 of them look lived in. So you might ask, what about Haymitch? Well, he's a few doors down, and despite living there the longest, Katniss says his house has an air of abandonment and neglect. Even the Capitol groundskeepers struggle to keep it under control. Haymitch drinks, isolates himself, and lets the place rot. Empty bottles, trash, and smells of liquor and vomit. It stays that way until Katniss convinces him to hire Gale's mom, Hazel Hawthorne, as a housekeeper. Between the scenes in Catching Fire when Katniss wakes up Haymitch and then when she goes to bargain for Peeta's life in the Quarter Quell, Hazel has cleaned the place up. Aside from your annual duty as a mentor, the PTSD, nightmares, and guilt, and whatever else the Capitol decides to exploit your celebrity status, daily life slows down. Every week, a peacekeeper slips an envelope of money under your door, your victor winnings. Sometimes they even deliver food. After Haymitch wins, he sees this as an insult. After fighting so hard to survive the Capitol, they're now making sure he stays alive. That's just how he takes it. Now that the victors are rich, they don't need to work in their district's industry, but to avoid looking like freeloaders, the Capitol requires victors to have a talent, something they could be interviewed about if needed. While communication between the districts is forbidden, those house phones connect directly to the capital. Katniss uses hers to talk with Cinna about her talent. She chose fashion, though Cinna does all the work. For Peeta, it's painting. Now that he's wealthy, he can afford real paint and canvases, and his PTSD pours straight into the art, digging up moments from the arena. On the train, after they share each other's favorite colors, Peeta takes Katniss to see some of his paintings. He has an entire train car full of them. The films mostly cut the talent system, except for one moment, Peeta painting Rue during the Quarter Quell evaluations. That scene isn't random, it's Peeta showing off his talent in a way that messes with the game makers. That context is mostly lost in translation, but it's exactly why that moment matters a lot to Peeta. After Katniss destroys the arena in the Quarter Quell, the capital bombs out District 12. Everything gone except Victor's village. In the books, all 12 remain standing, but in the movies, half the houses, including Peeta's, are destroyed. There's a pretty simple answer to why the capital did this in the movies. To create the Victor's village for the films, the production team built only parts of the set and then imposed the rest in post. The actors filmed a lot of that in front of blue screens. They probably destroyed half the village, so the filmmakers didn't need to make those houses. Adding piles of rubble would be much easier to do in post-production. But again, in the books, all 12 of them remain standing. Katniss thinks the capital left the village standing to house peacekeepers or other capital officials who might need to visit 12 in the future. Some think it was psychological, another way to haunt Katniss. Snow left a fresh rose when she made her first visit back to see the aftermath. A message either that she's predictable or that he's still watching her. Of the things lost in translation, what are some other moments or even entire scenes that were cut or simplified in the movies? Remember after the Quarter Quell reveal, when Katniss runs into the woods to process the emotions of going back into the arena. In the books, there's an entire scene before that makes this scene impossible. With the new peacekeepers in town, the electric fence has been turned back on, so running into the woods isn't an option. Instead, Katniss breaks into one of the empty village homes and hides in the cellar. It's another moment brought to life in the Catching Fire Illustrated Edition. And what about that moment when Peeta slips in the snow? Is he really that clumsy? Not exactly. Peeta permanently injured his leg in the 74th games. While the injury made it into the films, the part where he's given a prosthetic leg did not. In this scene, he's still getting used to it, and that's why he slips. Another scene cut entirely is Katniss and Peeta drawing together. Before Katniss's dad died, he kept a book of plants, telling what could heal and what could kill. His knowledge is how Katniss knows the nightlock berries are poisonous. After some time, she wants to update the book with everything she's learned on her own, but it's crucial the images are drawn exact, so Peeta helps with the illustrations. It happens after they've put aside the tension about who likes who, and it's one of the first things they do together by choice. Something not forced by the games or the cameras. Then there's this scene where Katniss drinks with Haymitch. In the books, when she drinks, she likes the burn and ends up drinking pretty heavily, wakes up hungover, which pushes Peeta to dump out all of Haymitch's liquor and pay off the supplier so neither of them can get more. Peeta steps into a mentor role. Knowing they're going back into the arena, he insists they train like careers. Technically illegal, but no one's going to stop them. They exercise daily, practice weapons, and rewatch old games with Haymitch breaking down the past victors. The movie jumps practically straight from the Quarter Quell announcement to the reaping, but in the books, months pass, and everything that happens in between those scenes is only seen in the books. In Mockingjay, Katniss and Gale visit Victor's village after she sings The Hanging Tree. The song is about a lover asking a question: will you join me in death? It's written like a mystery, never giving a clear answer, and Gale hears himself in that question. He connects the lyrics to his own uncertainty with Katniss, wondering how she really feels about him and whether she'll ever choose him. In this moment, the song isn't framed as anything rebellious, but as a metaphor to their relationship. I like to read it this way. Gale is the hanging man in the song. He wants Katniss, but being with him would mean to convince her to hang with him. to choose his path, his way of seeing the world, and that's something Katniss can't do. It's even Gale who later tells Peeta Katniss will choose the one she can't live without. It's funny because she chooses Peeta, and maybe if she chose Gale, she'd be hanging, in a metaphorical sense. It's entirely possible the Capitol just copy and pastes the same Victor's Village into every district. But since we've only ever seen District 12s, I like to imagine the opposite, that each one is tailored to its district's industry, environment, and has its own personality. So, just for fun, what would the other Victor's Villages look like? District 1 is the wealthiest, so I picture something closer to a private resort than a neighborhood, the kind of place designed to look impressive on camera. District 1 produces a lot of Victors, so it's possible all 12 original houses filled up a long time ago, forcing the capital to expand. District 2 is built on quarries and military strength. Many of District 2's houses are located on the mountain, so I imagine Victor's Village to be the same with a beautiful view. Stone and wood homes like something you'd see at a ski resort. District 3 is technology. Their village probably looks sleek and modern. The capital would limit advanced tech, but someone like Beatty, whose talent is inventing, wouldn't care, he'd build his own. Over time, I imagine these homes becoming quite customized, filled with inventions the capital pretends not to notice. District 4 feels obvious. Oceanfront villas with walking paths to the beach. It's a career district, so the upkeep would be excellent, and with how many winners they produce, the village would feel alive. District 5 is a bit harder to pin down. I picture something closer to District 12's layout, a suburb with simple practical homes, multi-storied, but maybe more occupied. Maybe more people live here, giving it a more lived-in vibe. Maybe some solar panels just for the sake of it being the power district. District 6 is where things could get interesting. Its territory overlaps old American cities Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago. The morphling drug addiction problem here makes me think it's more city, or at least more populated for its size. For the sake of saying something different, what if instead of houses, the Victors lived in refurbished high-rise penthouses? Old infrastructure repurposed. If not, a suburb like District 12. District 7 is easy. Luxury log cabins overlooking the forests and lumber industry. Probably the most isolated and peaceful of all the villages. If I had to live in one, it's District 7. Or District 4. District 8 has always given me a slightly wealthier District 12 vibe, so we'll play it safe and say it's a similar suburb. District 9 is green and has a ton of wide open land. I imagine these homes spaced further apart, each with its own stretch of fields. District 10 Victors probably live in ranch-style homes, surrounded by open space, barns, maybe even animals if the Victor wants them. District 11 would have large estates, big gardens with fruit, and maybe even personal orchards. And District 12, I imagine big multi-story brick homes in a suburb isolated from the coal miners and the merchants, but it still feels like 12. I'm curious, if you had to live in any Victor's Village, which would you choose? Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. When I first got into the Hunger Games, there were so many things that pulled me in. The games, the mutts, the careers, and high on that list is Victor's Village. I remember going to the theater to see Catching Fire back when about 90% of my knowledge came from just the first book. Going into Catching Fire in, 2013, part of me knew what was coming, part of me didn't. Early on, when Katniss is coming back from the woods and you see that sign reading Victor's Village, I remember thinking, wait, there's still so much more to this world. That post-games era, the Victory Tour version of Katniss, is still one of my favorites to this day. Thank you all for the continued support of the channel, and thank you for tuning in to today's games. I'll catch you in the next one.